All right, so we're going to quickly go through what the process for employer and educator mapping looks like, as well as the associated templates and toolkits and potential output summary slides will look like. So diving right in, the first step for an employer-educator mapping is collecting an education self-assessment. So this is collecting specific curriculum assessment results from an educator or ISP. So manufacturers can request those self-assessment files from the relevant education programs or from our ISPs directly. In the case that a self-assessment does not exist and a program hasn't been evaluated quite yet, manufacturers can infer competency coverage based on publicly available course descriptions and working hand in hand with ISPs. So basically the manufacturer would be performing a less involved version of a curriculum self-assessment alongside ISPs. Step 2, once the education self-assessment is collected, would be to prioritize programs. So manufacturers will pinpoint those key topics or KSAs within that competency model that are specifically relevant for their unique workforce needs, and will cross-assess those with which program offers what respective coverage. Step 3 is the targeted talent acquisition strategies. So these are the kind of routes that a manufacturer can take upon completing an employer educator mapping. So they can target institutions for hiring, so making specific agreements perhaps with educators to streamline recruitment processes. They can develop hand-in-hand internship or work-based learning options with respective educators. They can work to co-develop new courses to better produce students that will fit their unique workforce needs, and additionally sponsoring capstone projects with those educators that most align with their workforce needs. And the last step is really this is a tool that can promote hiring agreements. So creating articulation agreements between employers and educators for hiring, kind of streamlining the process and incentivizing hiring agreements based off of these assessment results. All right, taking a look at the specific employer and educator mapping template. As always, we start here with the instructions tab. So it gives an overview of what is an employer and educator mapping, how to navigate the various tabs within this workbook, the resources that you'll need, different levels of coverage, definitions, specific step-by-step guide on filling out the template, and then understanding the dashboard outputs, so what to do with the summary information. All right, so moving over to the next tab, which is the employer and educator mapping. All right, so as always, competency coverage and information is on the left-hand side, and all the new stuff will be over here on the right-hand side. So as always, we have the specific occupation level, relevant for each KSA, criticality, relevant for each KSA, and then the new column that we'll see here that is directly input for the employer and educator mapping is the curriculum coverage tab. So this is going to be all of the competency coverage for a specific curriculum, very similar to a curriculum assessment. So exposure, gap, or thorough coverage. Assuming that a curriculum self-assessment is already completed, this information can be directly copy and pasted from the self-assessment into this template itself. And all of these kind of colors will auto-populate on their own. Assuming that a self-assessment isn't done, the manufacturer would have to go through like line by line and enter exposure, gap, or thorough coverage for this. So throughout this entire process, the only manual input that's necessary is within this column K, and that's inputting the curriculum self-assessment results. From there, we can go to the dashboard tab, which will summarize all of the curriculum assessment or curriculum self-assessment results. All right, within this summary tab here, you're going to find basically the roll-up view of the educator-employer mapping. So starting at the highest level overview summary is this first table here. So this is going to show like for the curriculum at both the entry and mid-level, how closely they align to the competency model. So this alignment score is based on a variety of factors. It's based on coverage at each level. So as you can see within the next table over, we have the counts of thorough coverage KSAs, exposed KSAs, gap, for each criticality level across entry level. So then we take this alignment score here. And so to detail what the alignment score kind of takes into account, so we have our count of KSAs that are pulled directly from that employer educator mapping tab. And so then from there, we have this weighted scoring factors. So based off of the thorough coverage KSAs, the KSAs will be multiplied based on their criticality and their coverage. So if I have a KSA that is high criticality and thorough coverage, it's going to be weighted by a score of 3, as you can see here. And then if I have a high criticality KSA with only exposure coverage, it's going to be multiplied by a factor of 0.5 and 3, so 1.5. So that's how these alignment scores get collected. It's based on the multiplication of the KSA with the weighted score. So it's making sure that if you have more high criticality KSAs covered, your alignment score is going to be a lot higher than if you have programs whose criticality score is high but their coverage is low. So at both the entry and mid-level, you can see those respective alignment scores. So for example, this first curriculum seems to be best fit for a mid-level program. And then we also have the alignment score of just the full model in general. So basically, in summary, the higher the alignment score, the closer it is to the competency model. And then you'll see the breakdown, specific breakdown for KSAs at the entry level across criticality, and then same for this mid-level as well. And then we have the full model. So taking into account just across the full model, whether there's thorough, exposure, or gap, and then that respective alignment score. All right, and then this example I showed here is just for the manufacturing-based model, but within this document or within this workbook, we do actually have everything populated to complete the assessment for our EV model with the respective dashboard, as well as for our A&D model. So that is the employer educator mapping template. And then this is one example of what a summary output slide could look like to distribute results through educators and just across manufacturers in general to kind of get a high-level overview. So by region, you can see which programs most align to the competency model, with full coverage of highly critical topics having the highest weight in scoring as outlined within that template. So looking at like a regional view, you can see based on the alignment scores of different programs, kind of what a heat map of coverage would look like. So that's one example of how to summarize these results and show them off. But that is all that I have for employer and educator mapping. To view any additional resources, please take a look at the OMA landing page, and that will give more details on specific competency model toolkits and other things to use to apply this use case.